In the US and other first world countries, less than 2% of the population is feeding the other 98%. Most of us, in fact, get our food from hundreds or even thousands of miles away and only have around roughly a week's worth of groceries on hand at any one time. We are wholly sustained by a complex network of communications, supply lines, and relationships that most people really have no clue about. The obtaining and producing of food is no longer in the domain of the family. This has become a profession for experts. All of these interdependent systems that we depend on form actually a very fragile web. You know, even small disturbances can send shockwaves throughout the whole system, which interrupts supply flow. For example, Hurricane Katrina, the 9/11 attacks, and even small localized storms have proven this to be the case. However, the future may well prove to be worse. You know, so what would you eat if the grocery stores and restaurants were empty? Hi, my name is Eric, and I'm the editor of TacticalIntelligence.net, and I want to help you become confidently prepared for the coming hard times. You know, the fact that you're interested in watching this, I think we're alike in a lot of ways. You know, with all what's happening nowadays, I have concerns about the future safety of my family, as I'm sure you do. Here in the US, for example, the economy is teetering on the edge of collapse right now. You know, the media might portray that the stock market has recovered and everything seems okay, but the core fundamentals and health of the economy is still sick. You know, people are living off of debt. They practically have no savings. Our government continues to live way beyond its means. And as a result, there's this inevitability for massive inflation and economic upheaval, similar to what we saw in Argentina or the Weimar Republic, Germany. And all the while, terrorism and civil unrest continues to cause uncertainty, and it's a real threat to our fragile system. So with all of this going on, you may be wondering, as I am, if you're really prepared enough to get your family through it. Or you may wonder if the food storage and the preparations you have already prepared for are enough. And if things got bad enough, can you depend on even being able to keep a hold of those things? So ultimately, you have to ask, do you have the confidence in knowing that you'll be able to provide for your family when that time comes and that you'll be able to get through that period? You know, these thoughts and concerns are really ultimately what led me to become interested in prepping. Obviously, food storage is a huge part of this, but in reality, it's not everything. There may come a time, for example, where you have to leave that food storage behind, or you have to bug out without notice. When you can't depend on supplies, really the only thing you can depend on is your own skills. Skills, after all, is the only thing that will surpass supplies when the supplies run out. So food storage, for example, can go bad. It can be taken away by looters, or you may have to even leave it behind, as I mentioned, because you're forced to evacuate. But the skill and knowledge you have will always be with you. That cannot be taken away from you. Let's take hunting, for example. This is a skill that I've always wanted to learn, because I know that if I can supplement the food stores that I already have with food that I'm able to get from the wilds, this would be a huge advantage to my family in both a personal economic hardship as well as a full-on collapse situation. The only problem is I never grew up in a hunting family. I didn't have any friends that really went out and hunted. And although I do have experience with primitive trapping and wilderness survival and have done okay with that, up until recently, I've really had no experience whatsoever with hunting. Again, this was something I always wanted to learn, but you know, I was just completely overwhelmed by the sheer amount of info and experience that you seem to need to know in order to be a successful hunter. For example, first of all, you know, it's knowing what gear I need to buy, then knowing where to go to find the animal, knowing where to shoot it, then even what to do with it once you have it. Like, in other words, how do you field dress it and take it home? How do you butcher it? And then how to prepare it for dinner. And if you can't use it right away, how do you preserve it? And then even before all this, how to know if the animal was healthy or sick, so that I'm ensuring I don't bring something home that'll give my family some weird disease. You know, it wasn't until recently when I met this guy named Danny that my whole viewpoint about this opinion changed. Here's a 50-something-year-old guy that, you know, he looks like a cross between Grizzly Adams and Gandalf from The Lord of the Rings, you know, minus the pointy hat. But he showed me that hunting is really not that difficult or complicated if you're given the right guidance and direction. Take, for example, hunting wild duck. One of the best ways to hunt them, if you want to put food on the table, is to sneak up to them in small coves and areas of water near the shoreline and shoot them before they see you. But given that they're an extremely wary and alert bird, and also the fact that they can see 2 to 3 times farther than humans, it's often difficult to find them before they spot you and take off. But Danny was able to open my eyes and show me a method of knowing where they actually are without even having to see them, so that you can sneak up on them and take a shot before they fly away. Danny can explain it better, as I'll show you in this following video.
Compared to a small duck that's hiding behind a small clump of grass, how much easier is it to see those ripples on the water than to find that small duck or goose sitting someplace? Those ripples are the dead giveaway. Use them.
That's put more game on the table than anything else I've ever learned, I think, is that anything on the water makes ripples. Ducks are really small, ripples are really big. If you want to find the ducks, you look for the ripples, they'll bring you to the ducks. Don't try to find a little tiny duck on a big pond. Ripples are the sound waves of the water. They'll tell you an awful lot. Follow the ripples and it'll bring you back to where whatever's moving is. When you're duck hunting around ponds and stuff, it's real nice that you have gullies and valleys and whatever else to peek around or peek over as you're looking for ducks. And you can find them before they see you. And again, this is where knowing how to read ripples tells you a lot about what's going on in the water.
A really nice Drake Woody with a nice crown. Beautiful bird.
So we can see that knowing where to find animals and knowing what to look for so that you can find them is a huge part of successful hunting. And while some of it you may get from a book, if someone can show you, it really makes it a lot easier. When I first met Danny, for example, he was the original caretaker of the property that my family moved into. You know, he seemed like an outdoorsy kind of guy, and being that I'm really big into the outdoors, we were chatting a little bit and hit it off. And we're chatting about different things, and hunting came up, you know. And as we were going on in this conversation, I asked him, hey, what's the biggest buck that you've ever took? You know, I figured that this was the typical thing hunters talk about. But after telling me, it was his next response that really floored me. He told me, listen, I'm not a trophy hunter. I hunt for meat. You know, he went on to say that for the last 30 plus years, he's been putting food on the table and supporting his family through what he's been basically able to obtain from the local woods and forests in the rural suburban area that we live in. You know, it was at that moment that if there was anyone that I wanted to learn how to hunt from, it was definitely him. You know, I mean, who best to learn from than from someone who literally lives off the food he obtains from the wild? You know, so again, after meeting him for the next 8 months, what happened was he took me under his wing and showed me how to hunt pretty much everything from squirrel to deer and anything in between. You know, I learned where to find the animals, how best to hunt them, how to field dress and butcher them and prepare them for the table, as well as how to preserve them. And now I want you to learn what I learned. Yeah, not from me directly, because really I don't have nearly the experience that Danny does, but directly from him. And believe me, this is something that you can learn. For example, in the next video that I'm going to release, I'm going to have Danny demystify one of the most intimidating aspects of hunting for people, which is how to process the meat, especially on a big game animal like a deer or bear or caribou or something like that. And you'll quickly see that it's really not that intimidating or difficult, you know, once you've clearly seen how it's done. So in the meantime, I'd love to hear your comments or any questions you have. So be sure to leave one below this video. Thanks guys, take care.